Do I have permission to go?
Mr. Chairman, indeed, if you let's start the meeting.
Right. Okay. I'll go on a count of 5. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, colleagues, for the first of 2 meetings of the Political Committee. Today, we'll be discussing 2 of our reports on NATO-European Union relations and on the situation in the Gulf region. The second committee meeting, which will take place tomorrow, will discuss the revised General Report on China, vote on the special report on COVID-19, vote on the resolution in relation to the special report on China, and elect committee and subcommittee officers. Please note, I'm advised that the list of amendments for the draft resolution, a transatlantic strategy on China, can now be found in the documents section. As you know, the deadline for amendments was yesterday afternoon, and I'm told that the list of amendments also includes the position of the General Rapporteur on every one of the amendments. Just some housekeeping reminders, if I may. If you face any difficulties during our meetings, please write in the operator chat, and NATO PA staff will assist you to the best of their abilities. Alternatively, you can also contact the staff in charge of the voting process at vote@nato-pa.int. I'll tell you that again, vote@nato-pa.int. The first part of our committee is the adoption of the draft agenda. But more than that, we're going to use this as an opportunity to test our voting system. So NATO PA staff, please launch the vote. Please note that your access to all polls during the meeting is based on information provided to the NATO PA staff by your Secretary of Delegation. If you're eligible to vote in this meeting, they will have informed you which email address you needed to log in with. If you've not logged in with the correct email address, you must log out and log in with the correct one. The PA staff should now start poll on the adoption agenda. And members in turn should click on poll, P-O-L-L, on the right side of your screen and vote to adopt the agenda, to reject it, or to abstain. You have 1 minute to vote, and a clock will appear at the bottom of the screen. Please vote now. NATO PA poll staff, please start the timer. I make 15 seconds to go. 10, 5, and the minute is up. NATO PA staff, please close the vote and publish the result. May I ask the committee director to announce the results?
Indeed. So, Mr. Chairman, we have 18 votes in favor of adopting the agenda. Nobody voted against and nobody abstained. So the agenda is adopted. More importantly, the poll works. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, can I just say that we've done rather better than the standing committee. because when the Standing Committee tried to test the voting, then it didn't work very well. But it's very good that we've actually been able to do that. We have another chance to demonstrate our familiarity with the new regime, because I'd now like the committee to adopt the summaries of our 3 previous meetings: London during the last annual session just over a year ago, and our 2 online meetings in July and August. NATO PA poll staff, start the poll, adoption summaries, and start the timer. And once again, it's a repeat of what we did a moment or 2 ago in relation to the agenda. Fifteen seconds left. Close the poll, please.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, again, success, 18 votes in favor. Oh, I'm sorry, this is still the old poll. We're still waiting for the new results.
For the new
yes,
one.
but exactly the same results. No, actually even more, 20 votes in favor of adopting the summaries.
Very good.
So, yeah.
Okay. Right, we move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is to consider or to note consideration of the comments of the Secretary General of NATO, Chairman of the North Atlantic Council, on the policy recommendations adopted in 2019 by the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Can therefore we move that these comments of the Secretary General are adopted, or noted, I think is more correct. Any objection? In that case, I'll move on. We now turn to consideration of the revised draft report of the Subcommittee on NATO Partnerships, entitled The NATO-EU Partnership in a Changing Global Context. And that will be presented by Sonia Crimi of France, the rapporteur. I will now hand the floor to the rapporteur, Sonia, to present her revised draft report. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Directeur de la Commission, mes chers.
Thank you very much, President, Chair, dear colleagues. I am particularly pleased to present the revised report, draft report today from the Subcommittee on NATO Partnership, focusing on the partnership between NATO and the EU in a global context that is shifting. Now, this report has been adapted since our last meeting to take into account, as I promised, your comments, your suggestions that were all very relevant. The report should also be revised on 2 items, the defense spendings of European allies and the access of non-member states, which are, of course, areas where there have been important developments since the handed in of the revised version of this report to the International Secretariat. The International Secretariat has redoubled efforts in the last few weeks to make sure that we can enjoy the timely delivery of all documents in the 2 working languages of NATO, and this was no minor feat. And this also explains why very last-minute modifications and changes will not be very welcome, but I have nevertheless taken into account most of your comments, and I would like to again thank the International Secretariat for its hard work to make sure that we have a successful revised report. Firstly, let me very briefly highlight the major salient points in this report. With their respective structure, their own mandate and modalities, the EU and NATO both strive to build a common Euro-Atlantic destiny. They are bound by common values, which are democracy, the rule of law, human rights, gender equality. The EU and NATO also have 21 member states in common and also have a footprint in the same areas across the world. NATO and the EU are also natural partners which are faced with the exact same strategic challenges and the same global threats. Cooperation, therefore, between the two of them is more vital than ever in the face of shared geopolitical challenges, such as, for example, instability in the south, climate change, the rise of China, hybrid war, or emerging technologies. We have proven that the response that was given to the COVID crisis, that there is true complementarity and coordination between the two organizations. NATO has provided significant military and logistical support, while the EU has provided political and socio-economic responses to the crisis. The EU is also going to bring about rapid response mechanisms in the field of health. The two organizations, therefore, have very strongly mobilized against disinformation and hybrid threats during the ongoing crisis that is unfortunately still affecting us today. This crisis is also an illustration of the tremendous bolstering of cooperation between the EU and NATO, which is underway since the signature of the joint declaration between the two organizations in 2016 on the margin of the Warsaw Summit. This joint declaration identified at the time 7 fields for cooperation. A lot has been done, and this is something that, of course, we welcome. Having said this, there are still a number of pending issues that complicate the implementation of this partnership, which is strategic for both organizations. I think that we need to be very frank to have credible and honest exchanges. Since 2016, cooperation between NATO and the EU has indeed considerably been strengthened, both on the strategic and operational levels, with significant progress in the fields of mobility, military mobility, cybersecurity, and the fight against hybrid threats. The successes that the two organizations have had in the field of operational maritime cooperation, especially in the Mediterranean, under the Operation Sophia for the EU and Sea Guardian for NATO, of course, are testimony to this. Today, the EU and NATO maintain close and regular contacts. Nevertheless, synergy could be bolstered. It is strained by institutional shortcomings and sometimes mutual suspicion. For example, high-level meetings between NATO and EU only happen in an informal setting, which prevents the sharing of classified information. I had the opportunity to say just this during our excellent webinar with the DSG of NATO. I expressed my concern concerning the lack of invitation extended to the EU during the last defense ministerial meeting, which was a practice that was established since 2016. The DSG thankfully reassured us and explained that this was only due to the exceptional circumstances due to the COVID crisis. He explained that they were facing institutional and organizational issues, which explained why this invitation was not extended. Formalizing cooperation between NATO and the EU on this very issue would be a true asset.
Parmi les alliés non membres de l'OTAN.
The efforts carried out by the EU are creating a number of concerns among allies who are not members of NATO. For example, the definition of battle groups, the creation of PESCO, and the European Defence Fund are examples. We also see progress in the EU in terms of capability development, which are still quite timid. Battle groups have not yet been deployed. And the agreement of European leaders as regards the next multi-year budget for the EU has led to a reduction for defense projects. The budget, for example, for military mobility, which is an important cooperation field, was reduced to 1.5 billion euros. And also the planned budgets for the EDF and the European Peace Facility have also been reduced. We need, however, to welcome the European efforts in terms of defense and security, which are beneficial for NATO's capabilities. For example, 38 out of the 47 projects of PESCO reflect NATO's priorities. If we look at the forecast within NATO countries for defense expenditure in 2020, we see that we have reason to have an optimistic vision for the future, in particular looking at defense expenditure of European allies and also of Canada, which will continue to increase, as has been the case since 2015, to reach 4.3% of increase in 2020. 7 European allies have already reached the threshold of 2% of GDP devoted to defense in 2020. And there were previously 3 members that had already reached this goal. So this is the case now for 16 allies who are also reaching the threshold of 20% of their defense budget that is devoted to equipment. If we look at the agreements that have been signed, we now see that CSDP projects can be opened up to member states of the EU. The EU and NATO are now going in along the path of strengthened dialogue in order to increase the capabilities of European allies while avoiding the 3D, duplication, decoupling, and discrimination. But this, of course, needs to go even further. I would like now to highlight a few points which were included in the report in order to reflect your comments. First of all, I would like to stress the fact that the revised report highlights NATO's perspective in order to better reflect the priorities of the alliance overall. This revised report stresses the fact that the US commitment in favor of European security remains crucial, even if European allies are able to develop their capabilities further. The revised report is also taking stock of the state of the current cooperation as regards hybrid threats, cybersecurity, and stresses the role of both organizations in strengthening the capabilities of our partners. As regards what needs to be done to overcome the obstacles to a more robust cooperation between NATO and the EU, and as regards a formalization of relations and an operational cooperation, in particular regarding the complex relationship between Turkey and the other members of the alliance and the EU. Here, we need to welcome the fact that the initial talks between Turkey and Greece have resumed in order to overcome their differences, and the deconfliction mechanism that has been set up within NATO has played an essential role in this respect. We also need to recall the fact that as allies, we all have the same goals: ensure stability and prosperity on our territories and in our neighborhood. To this end, information exchange is an essential tool. I received an amendment also from the Ukrainian delegation. I would like to thank them. This pertains to paragraph 17, where Ukraine would like to mention the illegal annexation of Crimea, and also mentioning what is happening in the east of Ukraine. So I think that we can take on board these Ukrainian amendments. Dear colleagues, to conclude, I would like to recall three proposals which have been made. First of all, we need to be able to overcome our political differences and be able to formalize our relationship to facilitate the exchange of information using the Berlin Plus arrangements. Secondly, this cooperation could be usefully used in order to enable us to better understand the consequences of China's rising power on the international scene, and also to help us better assess the opportunities and challenges which stem from the rise of China. And this should be done through a structured dialogue. Finally, in the field of artificial intelligence, where there are both opportunities for our alliance, but also risks for the Euro-Atlantic security. The successful opening of the Center of Excellence in the hybrid field in 2016 is a useful model to follow. Dear colleagues, we need to continue to work in order to deepen relations between NATO and the EU, as this is in the interest of our common security interests, but this is also based on shared values. For this reason, I would like to express the hope that the strengthening of the transatlantic link and of our partnership be put on the agenda of allies in coming months. And if you so wish, I think that, well, I hear that Lord Campbell has rung the bell, that therefore I need to conclude my intervention. I would simply like to thank you.
Not my bell, Sonia. I'm speaking to you from the House of Lords in London. And in fact, earlier today, I had to ask a question in the chamber. And there is still some business going on here. And I can't turn off the bell, but it was not intended to inhibit your excellent presentation, if I may say so. Now, are there any, if there are any comments or questions, perhaps we can take them all together and then you could answer them en bloc, as it were. Are there any questions or comments that anyone would like to address to Sonia?
Indeed, Mr. Chairman, we have 4 delegates willing to take the floor, and
right.
the first one.
Just before they do, we have another important report to deal with, so I would like contributions to be confined to 1 minute, please.
Indeed. So
you.
Sure. The first on the list is Mr. Chris Peters, from member of the European Parliament and the head of the European Parliament delegation to the NATO PA.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tout d'abord, je veux féliciter.
I would like to start by congratulating our colleague.
I think that you have emphasized the importance that EU and NATO have the same values, the same goals, and are complementary when you look to what we are doing. 1 + 1 is 3 and not 2 when we are working very intelligent. Now, for me, it's very important to emphasize that you mentioned that the budget is there for military mobility, cybersecurity, and so on. You must know that there is also some possibility. For example, the European Investment Bank can also, for example, military mobility, certainly when it's double use, can do something. And because I have 1 minute, Chair, for me it's very important that you said that the relationship between the European Parliament and the PA NATO can be enforced, because now we have a sui generis statute, and that is not, I must say, a very good status for us. We cannot vote, and so on and so on. Because I hope that in the future we can be a full partner of the PA NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and that is sui generis that we can skip. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your brevity. Who's next, Andres?
Then we have our colleague from Italy, Paolo Formentini, please.
Buonasera, grazie Presidente.
Buonasera.
Sarò brevissimo.
Good evening, and thank you very much, Chair. I had noticed that under item 37, we're being asked an opinion which, from my point of view, is a little bit too strong. There is the definition of the EU into an independent subject from the point of view of security as something irreversible. Since we are not Marxists, we do not believe in those ideas. I would suggest greater caution, also because it is then contradicted by item 45, which underlines very well the different positions that France and Germany have on the vision regarding our future security and the utopia that is a European army. I agree with the part pertaining to China, although Europe comes in last after the United States and NATO had showed us the way forward. Thank you.
Another very good example to follow. Who's next?
Un altro ottimo esempio da seguire. Il prossimo...
What is me? Yes, Mr. Chairman, now I got the floor, yeah. Thank you very much. First, I congratulate Sonia for the good job. She worked better than me, it seems. It is a very comprehensive and good report.
Forgive me interrupting. You're not about to begin your own presentation, I think.
No.
You want to make comments?
Yes,
Thank you. That's fine.
But, Mr. Chairman, dear Sonia, as I tried to express in previous meeting, and now Sonia partly hinted some parts of this problem, the picture seems drastically different from Turkey. On NATO-EU cooperation is very good, of course, but there are a lot of suspicions on the side of EU from Turkey. As I said before, we want to rely on NATO for a collective defense. These EU initiatives will complicate the issues or complicate the cooperation, collective defense, if non-EU members are not led in the EU operations, especially EU Defense Agency, EU defense budget. But it seems that I say that because for almost a decade, EU didn't fulfill its promises to this end. On the other hand, Turkish public view is that EU complicate some issues and expect the solution with a Turkish flexibility, especially after accession of the Greek Cypriot administration in the EU, contrary to the founding agreements of Republic of Cyprus. According to that, Cyprus cannot be a member in any organization, in any union that Turkey is not part of. I will not table any amendment, but this is the view from Turkish side. I hope EU and our NATO members can address these concerns in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ahmed, for being so brief. And last but not least,
Actually, we
who's the
have
fourth?
a few more delegates willing to take the floor now. We have
Okay, well, my recommendation of 1 minute stands. Who's next?
sure. We have now a delegate from Greece, Ms. I'm sorry, yes, Ms. Tsaki.
Θέλω και εγώ να συγχαρώ τη συνάδελφο για την πολύ καλή εισήγηση. Θέλω να τη ρωτήσω το εξής. Η Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση φαίνεται να εξερευνά...
I have a question. The EU is envisaging autonomy from NATO. Despite Biden's victory, let us not forget statements by the French president concerning the prospect of Europe acquiring strategic autonomy. And similar proposals have been submitted by the German SPD. We heard recent proposals from the German socialists. Now, it seems Europe is seeking a more active role when this is more feasible. Of course, this does not go against the objectives of the alliance. How would you expect NATO to respond or welcome, receive these proposals concerning a more active role of the EU in security and defense? This is my question.
Or wish to speak, Andreas?
Yes, our next speaker is the head of the Greek delegation, Ms.
yes,
Giannakou.
How many more, though?
And one or two more.
Right. Well, I think we have to close the list now.
Yes.
So can we have the next speaker? Marietta, on you go.
Εγώ θέλω να συγχαρώ την κυρία.
I would like to congratulate Sonia. Very interesting, very interesting. The future of NATO and the EU in reality is in cooperation. Of course, the EU may acquire an independent system of security and this will not put an end to NATO, of course, if we work together. I also heard the Turkish colleague saying that Cyprus can become a member of any international organization if Turkey is not already a member. Well, it's in your hands, you know. You meet the criteria for membership in the EU, and then you will become a member of the EU, and this will also resolve the Cyprus issue. So who would ever say that Cyprus cannot be a member of any organization without Turkey? It is member of the EU. And we Greeks are not against Turkey's membership in the EU. That should be clear. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we now have Mr. Tomas Valashek, the former Slovak ambassador to NATO.
Very good.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lord Campbell. I will be brief, just 2 points, none of which constitute an amendment. The first point is to congratulate the author, Madame Khimi, on what is an excellent report, though I'll confess to being partial. You've cited my own reports among the bibliography, so of course I'm favorably predisposed. My second point, more seriously, is to highlight the need for deeper cooperation on protecting critical infrastructure against cyber attacks. Now, I know this sounds trivial in the grand scheme of things, but my rationale is simple. I mean, NATO is facing a situation today where our adversaries can achieve effects, strategic effects, through non-military means by simply attacking our critical infrastructure through cyber means. And NATO is in a paradoxical situation of possessing very few resources to marshal the member states' capacities to better defend themselves. Most of these tools lie within the EU. So my only complaint, my only minor quibble with the report is to suggest or to wish that it perhaps had addressed and better highlighted the need for deeper EU-NATO cooperation on how you tackle vulnerabilities against cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. Otherwise, I thought it was an excellent report, and thank you for a job really well done. Thank you.
Anyone? We closed the list. Was there anyone still on the list when we closed it? Hello? Andreas?
Yeah, sorry, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. We still have Mr. Paolo Formentini on the list. I don't know, he already spoke. I don't know if
Yes,
he
we've had
wants to
him
come in
already,
again.
I think. Okay, are we finished then?
I think he wants to speak
well,
again.
If he's got 30 seconds. Mr. Fiorentina?
Onorevole Formentini, 30 secondi. No, l'abbiamo visto e ora è scomparso.
Sorry? Go on.
No, purtroppo non si sente.
Can you press the button and speak?
We seem to have lost him. If
We
he
seem to have
comes
lost
back
him.
in again.
Right. I'm very sorry. I think we must move on to the response from Sonia Creamy. Sonia?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Directeur de notre commission.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Director. I'm going to be very short in order to let my Turkish colleague also present his draft report. To answer the question of Chris Peters, who's a member of the European Parliament, me too, I support what he suggested. I believe that we should move closer to the European Parliament, and the relationship between the European Parliament and the Parliamentary Assembly is an essential relationship. But at my level, well, this isn't really a decision that I can take. It's a decision that should be taken at the level of the Bureau. So it's not at my level to give you an answer with regard to institutionalizing this relationship. But on a personal standpoint, I'm in favor of what you suggested. For my Italian colleague, Paolo Formentini, you mentioned paragraph 37 in terms of the evolution of the European Union and the irreversible nature of the security framework. This is not a Marxist debate, let me reassure you. I just wanted to show that the European Union is trying to evolve in order to respond to a strategic goal that we have. So there is nuance here. And with regards to paragraph 45, there is also a nuance in relation to Germany and France. So these are nuances in their positions and not divergences. This is what I would answer in response to your two comments. To Ahmed Yildiz, thank you very much for your question. I do understand. Once again, on a personal standpoint, I fully understand where you're coming from, and I would say that the European Union has a clear membership system, and the assessment for membership is done objectively. At least that's what the EU tries to do. So that's what I would answer to your comment, but I do understand your position. Now, coming to Theodora Zakri, you made a comment about what the European Union is doing in terms of a European defense. This is not something that I wanted to talk about in my report. I don't think I use the term European army in my report. Not that it's not important, but because it's not a position that's shared by all of the EU members, and it's not shared by NATO either. And both organizations have to be complementary. In the defense capabilities of the European Union, their development is in response to a fairer burden sharing, a request that was made by other countries. And as Mr. Peters said, 1 + 1 = 3 and not 2 in this context, because there would be synergies, and we shouldn't see this as an institution attacking another. And finally, for the last two questions from Marietta, it wasn't really a question, but what you said with regards to Turkey joining the EU, I've also noted what you said. And for the sixth comment with regards to cyber attacks, I completely agree with what you said. We are members of parliament, so we represent our citizens, and there are clear risks that affect our societies. And if the NATO Parliamentary Assembly or NATO don't accept the fact that society is evolving together with threats, we have to understand that we have to do more in the face of cyber attacks. Thank you very much.
Well, we've had very interesting exchanges and debates. Can we then turn to the question of the adoption of the report? For that, I have to invite you once again to be successful in voting. So can I call upon the NATO PA poll staff to start the poll adoption PCNP report, start the timer, and if you press the polls on your instrument, then you'll be presented with yes, no, and abstain. Can we begin now?
Mr. Chairman, as the delegates are voting, I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that our Turkish colleague, Mr. Berat Çonkar, has also asked for the floor. I don't know if you would like to, after the vote, to give him a minute to make a short comment.
Do we know, is his request to make a comment on the document?
I have no idea. Probably, we'll find out. But now the voting is underway.
Well, we'll come back to that
Avec
once
plaisir.
the voting is complete. Five seconds. Time's up. So may we have the result of the vote?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this should be coming in a minute. And yes, we have 16 votes in favor, 1 against, and 4 abstentions.
Very good. The report is therefore adopted, and we must thank our rapporteur very much indeed. It is a topic which will not be frozen. It's a topic which is going to develop and develop, and to some extent, the development may be influenced by the attitude taken by the president-elect in the United States and the attitude of the USA, because some, I think, of our responses, and this includes the United Kingdom as much as anyone else, have been caused by the uncertainty which President Biden, I'm sorry, not President, which President Trump had indicated towards NATO in the course of his 4 years. Now, Turkish colleague would like a minute, is that right?
Thank you very much, Lord Campbell, for the floor. I just wanted to make a comment on the issues that's discussed. Actually, I am always focusing on fairness in our assessments. Here, if you look what happened in the island, the Turkish Cypriots accepted the unnamed plan with a referendum, and the Greek Cypriots rejected it. However, they were rewarded and unfortunately accepted into the European Union without resolving the conflict in the island. There are 2 different entities in the island, well, this created the problem in the European Union, and now we are seeing the ramifications and the effects of this on the European Union NATO cooperation. So I think we need to make sure that we know these facts when we deal with these issues. Thank you.
Okay, well, you've made your point. That being so, can I congratulate Sonia? This is an important topic, well set out, and extremely well discussed. And I am personally very grateful. We now turn to the consideration of the revised draft report of the Subcommittee on Transatlantic Relations, Security and Political Dynamics in the Gulf, which will be presented by our colleague Ahmed Yildiz, who is the rapporteur. It's over to you, Ahmed. We were scheduled to finish this session in 9 minutes. So clearly we're not going to do that. And my suggestion to all colleagues is that we should continue beyond the finishing time so as to permit a proper understanding and discussion of this equally valuable report compared to the one that we've just dealt with. So do not feel, Ahmed, that you have to rush. But once again, I will be imposing my 1 minute on those who wish to make comments or ask questions. Ahmed, over to you.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask the rapporteur, Mr. Yildiz, to press request to speak button so that we could bring him up on the screen. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, it is difficult to write a report on the Gulf region. In the draft report that was introduced to you in August and presented to you again today, I tried to explain the intricacies of the regional political and security dynamics and the different agendas that countries of the region pursue. The Gulf is divided along several fault lines, not only the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but also the conflict within the Gulf Cooperation Council over Qatar's independent policies. I would also argue that the recent agreements with Israel signed by Emirates and Bahrain also potentially create another fault line within the GCC. The US-Iranian confrontation has escalated in 2019 and the beginning of this year, while the internal turmoil in Iraq has reached alarming proportions the beginning of this year. The conflicts in Syria and Yemen, which are the worst, that directly affect the Gulf region, are far from over, with millions killed or displaced. Yemen is proving a breeding ground for terrorists. All these developments are taking place against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, which had a devastating effect on the region in terms of health crisis and drop of oil crisis affecting the economies of the regional countries. That said, this is not the aim of this report to present the situation in the Gulf as completely hopeless. Despite the menacing web of tensions and animosities, the Gulf countries have so far managed to avoid a full-fledged war. Waves of escalation are usually followed by attempts to de-escalate and negotiate. This is something good and promising. But obviously, we should not take this trend for granted. The main takeaway of this report is this: every opportunity should be used to break existing stalemates, deadlocks, and launch new diplomatic and cooperative initiatives in the Gulf. The pandemic can offer such an opportunity to set aside narrow national interests to advance international efforts to help countries most affected by the virus and to promote broader regional reconciliation. This opportunity should not be wasted, and the Euro-Atlantic community, us, should play our part. Dear colleagues, stability and the peace in the region mean stability also for NATO allies. We cannot ignore the geographical proximity of the Gulf region, as the Greek minister also emphasized. We must see the region through the lens of common interests and shared security challenges. And we must work together with the Gulf nations to enhance regional security and counter shared threats such as terrorism, weapons proliferation, and cyber attacks. To help secure a more stable environment, the Alliance is engaged in ongoing partnerships with the region since the late 90s, and especially since 2004, when NATO and 4 Gulf countries, namely Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Emirates, launched the Istanbul Cooperation Initiative to foster partnerships on common interests. We must continue and renew these efforts by deepening and broadening partnerships in the region, as well as helping cement diplomatic and cooperative initiatives in the region. At this point, now let me mention briefly some of the updates that I inserted in the report since August. First, with regard to the Iranian nuclear program, I specified that while European nations and the US somewhat differ in their approaches to Iran, they also share a number of concerns with regard to this program, as well as to certain Iranian foreign policy endeavors. I also highlighted the latest developments regarding Iran's commitments to this JCPOA. Following the US withdrawal from the deal, Iran announced it would reduce its commitments and followed through with its announcements in 2019 by restricting access of nuclear facilities to international inspectors. That was asked in August by a British colleague. And however, in August 2020, Iran retracted on its steps by allowing representatives of the Atomic Agency and Atomic Energy Agency to inspect 2 previously restricted nuclear sites. It is something good. In the new version of the report, I also expanded references to the role of China in the Gulf. Although China has important stakes in the region, namely 40% of Chinese crude oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz, China goes to China. China refrained from deploying naval capabilities to the strait. However, it is involved in arms deals and sales in the region, and last year conducted naval drills with both Saudi Arabia and Iran. We must certainly keep an eye on Chinese evolving posture in the Gulf. As far as the war in Yemen is concerned, in July 2020, Saudi Arabia renewed its attempts to broker a peace agreement between Houthi and the rival forces. However, hostilities in Yemen continue despite Security Council resolution calling for a cessation of fighting during the pandemic. As for the comments of one of my colleagues in our previous meeting, I took the liberty to outline what a reconstruction of post-war Syria may look like. Unfortunately, during pandemic, since the pandemic prevailed, this issue was somehow downplayed. That's why I didn't mention the possible actors, because most of the possible actors are silent due to pandemic. UN Special Envoy for Syria, de Mistura, estimated that Syria will need at least $250 billion to repair the damages caused by the war. However, it is important to remember that the reconstruction process is not only a matter of financial capability, but more importantly requires providing security, establishment of justice, and a political transition environment in Syria. Unfortunately, Assad regime makes the prospects of Syria's effective reconstruction in the foreseeable future rather illusionary and hopeless, at least now. Dear colleagues, the Israeli, Emirates, and Bahrain normalization agreements have cast renewed attention toward the region. I attempted to outline in the report the different viewpoints on the deal by outlining who opposes them, who favors them, and why. I can understand everybody some of those who argue that these deals are a necessary step for reconciliation in the Middle East. But we should be vigilant and cannot ignore the potential pitfalls associated with these deals that may cause a lot of disappointment across the region and were widely seen as the betrayal of the Palestinian sovereignty. Secondly, they do create new division lines between Gulf Arab states that signed or are sympathetic to the agreements and those who oppose it. In this fragile region, all parties should really be extra careful to ensure that new initiatives do not generate unwanted consequences and not harm the well-established parameters of the solution of this Palestinian problem. This version of the report expands the section on NATO partnerships with Gulf countries. More specifically, it provides a more detailed account on numerous activities of Istanbul Cooperation Office, such as providing platform for cooperation on the fight against terrorism and advising on defense transformation and planning. Other important achievements include the establishment of NATO Istanbul Cooperation Initiative Regional Center in Kuwait, which aims to improve cooperation on common security challenges. Finally, I want to once again emphasize the need to redouble our attention to Iraq. In the last decade, in 7 years, NATO helped train 5,000 Iraqi military personnel and 10,000 police officers. More recently, Allied defense ministers agreed in principle to bolster NATO's training programs in Iraq following the US request for a greater NATO involvement in the wider Middle East. NATO Secretary General signaled that the alliance is examining the possibility to further upgrade its contribution to the stability in the Middle East, but the exact scope of NATO's potentially expanded role in the region has yet to be agreed among the allies. I want to conclude my presentation by stressing that NATO 2030 reflection process provides us with the opportunity to renew our attention to the Gulf region. The region will remain key to our transatlantic security in the foreseeable future in terms of many, like energy supply and humanitarian cases, and it must remain a priority on the agenda of the allies in general and our assembly in particular. With that, I thank for your attention. I thank really Committee Secretariat and in general and Andreas in particular for helping me shape this report, which was not an easy task. It is difficult to write a report due to the nature of the governance threats, risks there, and it is more difficult to summarize it, Mr. Chairman. If I made some mistakes, I apologize from everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ahmed. I'm going to ask for questions or comments, and we'll get them all together and ask you to deal with them as a whole rather than question by question. Andres, have you any requests to speak?
I do indeed. We have 5 requests already.
Right.
And
well, can they? Yes, go on.
Sure. The first one on the list was a delegate from Israel, from a member of Knesset, Mr. Kozhinov.
Right. And let's please observe my 1 minute, if you will, because we are already over time.
Thank
please
you,
speak now.
Thank you, Lord Campbell. I will try to be short. I would love to speak about the Abraham Accords. Your special rapporteur just said it might create additional fault lines in the Gulf region and in the Middle East. We see it pretty opposite. Actually, the Abraham Accords eliminate this division between the Middle East and the Gulf states and the State of Israel. It's just oppositely, it enhances the security in the Gulf region, as we might openly say right now that our assessment of the Iranian detrimental actions in the region do not differ much from the Saudi assessments or Emirates assessments. So we might create here, we've got an opportunity to create a totally different Middle East or lines in the Middle East. And I would like to mention that the Abraham Accords have proved that we may proceed and gain progress without being all constant subject to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And I mean that it has proved, the accords have proved that the Israeli-Palestinian issue and the conflict is not the core issue right now in the Middle East. So we may pursue different tracks simultaneously, which is, by the way, is also good, might be good for our relations with Europe. So that's our vision, and again, from our point of view, Israel's point of view in generally, I think I represent it. It will enhance the stability, enhance the security, and open new horizons for the cooperation in the Gulf, in the Middle East. And we just hope that Palestinians won't be the last to catch that train. And just one last remark, please, with your consent. I'm really sorry. The definition of stabbing Palestinians in the back. We do witness in the recent days that the Palestinians are returning their ambassadors to the Emirates and Bahrain, and also they are renewing the security cooperation with Israel, security and civic cooperation. So things are doing well. Thank you, Lord Campbell. And thank you, thank you, distinguished listeners.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have 5 more speakers on the list. I assume you would want to close the list. Let me. Your mic is still muted. Let me unmute it for you. Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Yes, we have to close the list. So can we have, because Ahmed
sure. I'll read the names. Sure, Mr. Chairman. I'll read the names.
Just one at a time. That'll do.
Yeah. So we have Mr. Novruzov from Azerbaijan, Ms. Sakri from Greece, Ms. Bobrovska from Ukraine, Mr. Formentini from Italy, and Monsieur Roger from France. So, Mr. Novruzov.
Well, we can have all of these if they exercise some self-control.
Yeah.
Please go next. Who's next?
I would like to express my gratitude for this wonderful report. You know that we are located close to the Persian Gulf, and we have a pipeline which is the guarantee of the energy security of Europe. The interpreter apologizes. There is no sound coming from the other delegate.
Second speaker and.
I'm afraid we're not hearing.
Очень.
Hold on. We'll go on to the next, and we'll come back at the end to see if things are better. Who's the next?
Ms. Sakri from Greece. Ms. Sakri from Greece.
From Greece? Ms. Sakri from Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Yildiz. During the Trump presidency, Russia had the opportunity to extend its influence over Africa, the Middle East, and in other regions. Do you think this was also allowed during the good relations between Putin and Trump? The West lost influence. Turkey improved relations with Russia, bought the S-400 missiles. Don't you think this is against the fundamental principles of the alliance? And you mentioned also China selling arms to various countries. How would you see Greece forging an alliance with a country like China and purchasing armaments from China. How would that sound to you? Also, after Biden's victory, what is your take on developments in the US? How would you see NATO how does NATO see the influence of Russia over Turkey?
Well, there are quite a lot of questions in that one question. I'll leave it to our rapporteur to decide which of the, I think 3 or 4, which of those he wishes to answer. Who's next?
Ms. Solomia Bobrovska from Ukraine.
From Ukraine?
Exactly. Greetings from frosty Kyiv. Happy to see you all, but the better way, I hope to see you in Kyiv on PA NATO finally offline.
We do too. We do too.
But I didn't want to waste time, but want to thank you, Sonia, with accepting our amendments to her report. But still, I have a question to Mr. Ahmed, because I proposed one amendment to paragraph 26, and I think then when he mentioned Iran, which about the mistakenly downed Ukrainian civilian airliner this year, actually in January, I think that would be good to stress that it was a missile of Russian production, and it was reported by the U.S. intelligence. I mentioned the link to clarify the source, and I think that would be great if Mr. Ahmed will accept this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next, Andreas?
We have Mr. Formentini from Italy.
Okay, Mr. Formentini.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings once again. I wish to underline the very new nature of the Abraham Accords, not just in the Middle East. They mark a new dawn. They are a real game changer for the region. But they also have an impact on the Gulf region. We were talking about fault lines. The fault lines exist, unfortunately, and a part of the world within the Gulf region has sided with the West and with Israel. That is something we have to consider. Whereas another part of the Gulf countries, such as Iran, who have sided with China. This is the balance we have. Now it is up to the Palestinians to use these opportunities, which stem from the agreement signed on September the 15th in Washington, but it is also up to the Iranian government. Thank you.
Okay, it's commendably brief.
Mr. Chairman, we seem to have lost Mr. Roger, so that's all we have at the moment.
Okay, can we try? Have we lost the Azeri?
He's not on the list either. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, in that case, over to you again. I've got quite a lot to respond to, but over to you.
Thank you very much. At this late time, I will try to be brief. I respect the optimism of Israeli colleague and Italian colleague on Abraham's Accord. Hopefully they are right, but I cannot be that optimist. I follow these Palestinian issues since my student years in faculty, from Madrid conference, Oslo, and later as a diplomat, especially what happened during the last 3-4 years against the established parameters of the solution of this problem. I cannot be optimistic, but if they are optimistic, it is up to them. But I try to reflect both views in those who are concerned and those who are optimistic in the report. Especially when you visit Palestine, Israel, you see that the settlements and policies made the establishment of viable Palestinian state is very difficult over the years. On Azerbaijani colleague started to say something, but close to Gulf with big energy pipelines. Of course, Azerbaijan role is very important in the energy security of all us through pipelines, and I appreciate that. One Greek colleagues, she said during Trump presidency, 4 years, Russia increased its influence in Africa, in other regions. Of course, Russia, as you know, that we are following, is following a policy of restoring some of Soviet influence in some regions. But when it comes to Turkey, Turkey is a very deep-rooted state and can determine its national interests. Its national interests are very well established within Western bloc, in NATO also. Of course, that the expansion of Russian influence started with illegal annexation of Crimea, later in Syria. In Syria, in between, unfortunately, members of NATO allies did nothing to abort it. When Russia came, they did nothing to contain it in Syria. We made our best to restrict at least some of its influence in some parts of the region, but we have to cooperate on some issues, the confliction, terrorism, and in the future solution on Syria, because US is there, Russia is there, Iran with proxies is there. It is not an easy region, but everybody should remember that Turkey, when its borders are violated, we shut down the Russian plane. So, buying S-400 from Russia, she argued, will undermine NATO. She asked me how we approach if Greece buys weapons from China. I should remind her that Greece, through Cyprus, bought S-300 from Russia. It is in their soil, close to the Turkish border. Turkish S-400 purchase happened at a time. The threat from Syria, from Russia, was very high through Syria. And unfortunately, United States and other allies were reluctant to sell this kind of anti-ballistic missiles or to deploy their own in Turkish border on Syria. If the S-300 doesn't undermine, then we should think about this argument about S-400. Turkey declared several times it is ready to review with NATO, if there United States, to review if really there is a danger, risk, and how to eliminate it technically. But unfortunately, this was not accepted by the United States. Ukraine amendment, dear colleague, she mentioned some amendment, but I didn't see it. She said that the missile shut down the plane was of Russian production. She said on 26th paragraph, but I'm not sure whether it is the number is same. On 26, I cannot see it. I will be happy to consider it if she, yeah, I see. If there is a verified information that it is of Russian production, I would insert it certainly. Then Secretariat can take care of it. If it is proven that no problem to insert it here. On the other hand, our Italian colleague praised the Abraham Agreement as a good, real game changer. As I said, I doubt that, because let's see what Biden administration, what way will follow, because before Secretary Clinton, Democrat administration was the pioneer of two-state solution for a viable state, but Trump administration made a lot of ambiguities and some actions that harmed these parameters. Let's see, but I am not optimistic on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can check the question. I think it's let me put it this way. There's a presumption that it was the Russian missile, but I think it is more, I think the conclusion is now even firmer than that as a result of, yes,
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt you, but Monsieur Roger from France is back requesting the floor. Would you like to give him a minute?
A minute.
Yep.
A minute. A minute for France. A minute for France, so long as they don't. Hold on. A minute for France, so long as they don't beat Scotland on Saturday.
On va essayer.
We'll try not to beat you. Okay, can you hear us? Can you hear me? Excellent. Okay, so as regards the relationships between Israel and the Middle Eastern countries, of course, we need to go towards solutions that will make it possible to achieve peace and dialogue. But we should not forget, from my point of view, from the French point of view, that we also need to have recognition of the Palestinian state, and for these two states to have secure borders and that they be respectful one of the other. So work needs to be done. And as regards Vienna and the problems with Iran, we do need to go back on the path of negotiation, and perhaps the new Biden administration will make it possible to come back to the table and negotiate. Iran had made interesting offers, but of course, the ambiguity of the Trump administration had masked this. So thank you very much, and apologies, I had problems with charging my computer.
Very good, and thank you for being brief. Ahmet, is there anything I think you had responded, and I don't think.
Yeah, I agree that with the remarks of French colleagues, it is the agreed principles on this issue indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we now move to adoption of the report, and I will ask the NATO Parliamentary Assembly staff to start the poll. You could vote by clicking on the poll, which is to the right, I think, of your instrument. You have 1 minute from now, and the question is, are you willing to adopt the report, adopt or refuse or abstain? 60 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, the poll is not launched yet, but yeah, it is now. Yes, sorry.
Oh, it is now. Right, I beg your pardon.
The minute is up, Mr. Chairman.
Minute
Shall
is
we
up.
just-
Very good. All voting should be complete. So close the poll, please.
Yes, the vote should be coming in very soon. Yes, so we have 14 votes in favor, 1 against, and 1 abstention.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much, Ahmed. Very interesting report, and you found it necessary to update it, which just tells us, I think, that these topics are not going to be frozen, that they will be topics to which we will have to return again and again, not least in relation to the Middle East, position of the Palestinians, things of that kind. I'm very grateful to everyone. That, colleagues, concludes the first meeting of the Political Committee by computer or virtual or whatever you want to describe it. I confess I went into this with some apprehension, but it's all gone very much more smoothly than I had anticipated. For that, I want to thank all of you for your constructive and thoughtful participation and for, by and large, keeping to my imposed time limit. I want to thank the interpreters because when you're trying to interpret from around the world effectively, then it's inevitable that there are going to be occasions when perhaps the reception isn't as good as you would expect, where we, for example, to be in a conference center or something of the kind. Thank you very much for that. And also to all the members of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly who put all this together. We will reconvene tomorrow at 17:30 Central European Time. For our British colleagues, that's 16:30, 4 o'clock rather than 5 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow afternoon at 17:30. In the meantime, if you're traveling, have a safe journey. And if you are not traveling, then have a good evening. I myself am about to go to Edinburgh on a sleeper, which is never as comfortable as I hope it ought to be. Thank you all very much, and we'll meet tomorrow. Bye. Andreas, thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it went really well. It was a really good meeting.
Yes, it did. Yeah. We were lucky. I mean, the difference is that if the technical stuff all works, then it's an easy meeting. It's when the technical stuff doesn't work, people get frustrated and understandably bad-tempered. That's when it's quite tricky.
Absolutely, yeah.
But we've done well.
Well done.
And you'll be able to go home. Who's making supper this evening? That's what I want to know.
I will find out. Maybe we'll just order food. We can do that too. But thanks for asking.
Very good.
Okay. Have a good trip. Have a good journey.
Yeah.
And,
Yep. Sure. We'll talk tomorrow morning at some stage.
let's do that. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Good. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.